Nigeria decided to allow privatization in generation and in distribution. Transmission, which is the link that holds these two important subsectors together, has continued to be held under government monopoly. If you really want the power system to evolve, if you want big players to come in and generate, they want to be sure that whatever they generate, they can sell. A system where you are allowed to generate and you are allowed to distribute, but you are not allowed to transmit, cannot encourage long-term investment by stakeholders. Nigerian government took a step forward in that direction when they decided to move electricity transmission from the exclusive legislative list to the concurrent list. What that means is that states now have the power to license electricity transmission. You can build a small grid within your state, but it does not say when you build that small grid that you want to build, how is it going to interface with the national grid? Can you decide to use a generating plant, a generating facility that already exists in your state? Can you decide to use that generating capacity and divert from the national grid to your mini grid? These mini grids that states are allowed to license, who is supposed to generate power for them? Can they transmit the power generated from already existing generating companies that are already connected to the national grid? Down the line, you might run into a lot of difficulty implementing that law. What are the boundaries? Who owns the facilities of the transmission companies within a state? So a state has the power to regulate the mini grid that they allow, that they license, but they don't have the power to regulate the assets of the national grid that is located or that are located within their state. It's a good law in a way, but it didn't go far enough, in my opinion. If we're really serious about electric power transmission in Nigeria, we need to take that bold step and unbundle the transmission company of Nigeria. The transmission company of Nigeria has regional areas. These regional areas already have distribution companies mapped to them, and I'm sure they have generation companies mapped to them. So technically, the divisions are already there. What we need to do now is to allow these 8 divisions to exist autonomously, to become 8 regional transmission companies. If there are some that are too small, you can merge 1 or 2. So at the end of the day, if we end up with 6 regional transmission companies, I think that will make a lot of sense. The goal here is to improve transmission capacity. If you have just one company wanting to do contracts in Lagos and here and here and here and here, they can, but it will not be at the same pace because all these resources come from the same purse, the same budget, the same donor. But if you have a system where you have 6 regional transmission companies, you break up the assets of TCN to become these 6 regional transmission companies, 6 regional grids interconnected. It gives you a super grid. Now, TCN will not go extinct. TCN will become the regulator, the one that sets the standard for all these companies to operate. TCN will be in charge of interconnection. Whatever has to do with one state or the other, one company or the other, and this and that and that. TCM becomes a regulator, which is what government is supposed to be. In terms of ownership structure of these new transmission companies, if you have a situation where by virtue of ownership of already existing infrastructure, federal government through the TCN already own a percentage of assets. So they have equity. So say federal government will say, for these 6 transmission companies, TCN will own 30% of their shares. So federal government still has a strong voice in those companies. We're going to give 40% shares to the states who are willing to put part of their own IGR or part of their own budget, part of their own whatever money they can source if they want to use a loan, however they want to develop themselves. If they feel like they want to prioritize power transmission, we'll allow them the means to do so. So states can come together to form those regional companies and own a percentage of the stakes, say 40%. So if federal government owns 30%, how many states that are concerned will own 40%? And whatever else is left, you bring in a private operator that will take those remaining shares to the market. So you have a private operator operating this system, raising money from Nigerian capital market. If we put all these resources together, now the federal government brings in donor resources and all the donor agencies and all that as part of their funding. When you inject all these funds together, you have independent boards running 6 transmission companies. These companies will begin to develop. They will begin to compete among themselves. You will see a zone that used to have the capacity to transmit 1,000 might decide that they want to grow because they have demand. They have Gencos and Discos who are willing to do business. They decide to invest substantially in their own transmission company, and then they are able to improve their power system significantly. One issue about our transmission system is that we want to develop all of them uniformly, and it's never going to work like that. You need to break it up and allow people to compete among themselves. Allow demand. A company in Lagos, for example, will grow fast because they already have a lot of demand for power. The same thing will apply to a company in Port Harcourt. They will decide how they want to fund their transmission companies. So you still have TCN running the international transmissions, running the intergrid connections. So you have 6 regional grids interconnected. The interconnections will be managed by TCN. The international connections will be managed by TCN. So you have TCN and then you have 6 other regional companies. What do you have to lose? Nothing. You give opportunity for people to buy shares through the capital market. You can significantly raise money in billions of dollars to upgrade these systems we're talking about. A lot of state governments are willing to put in some billions to make sure they get 24 hours power supply. Some areas have been able to generate sufficient power but not able to have 24 power supply because there's no transmission link. So if you have the generation and you have the distribution, you have no transmission. It doesn't work. So even with this new law where they say, oh, now you can have a mini grid within your state. What is that mini grid supposed to control? Can you yield control to the mini grid? Can you take their facility and transfer it to your mini grid? No, I don't think you can under the current laws. So we really need to rethink that and look at it again. If we're thinking long term and we're thinking proper progress in this particular sector, I think this is the way to go. This is Discourse, and I'm Azubuike. Thank you for watching this video.